Welcome to On Air with Phoenician Hunter and Tesla 369. Today we're going to be discussing The Power of God, a very well-researched article by Phoenician Hunter, and also the Phoenician Secret Doctrines, Part 1. So through this podcast, we'll be delving into the ritual worships of certain deities. We'll look at the split between the esoteric and exoteric teachings of the Phoenicians. We'll look at astrology and its connection to Albert Pike, and also the connection between sacred science and ancient astronomy and physics. We'll look at astronomy and why the ancients held it in such high esteem, specifically the Phoenicians, Egyptians, and the Greeks. And we'll also look at the certain learned Phoenician priests and their belief, or at least the research that we've seen from Phoenician Hunter on how they deceived mankind and what researchers have garnered from that. So, welcome, Phoenician Hunter, to an interesting podcast.
Thank you. This is a very difficult topic to discuss because people have such strong feelings towards their idea and beliefs concerning God, and rightly so. My only concern with most people's beliefs is that it's not their own. It's not original. They've adopted something that has been prepackaged basically for them, and don't look beyond that, accept what's been said or what's been written. And just follow it, blindly.
So why don't you start us off with again the research that you've done and the brilliant article that you've written, which our listeners can find at substack.com at Phoenician Hunter. Why don't you start from the very start so we can at least set the scene?
Okay. So looking into Phoenician, history and culture and religion, you start to see things that are relevant today, even, and things that have been adopted across the world by other cultures. They, to me, perhaps weren't the first to develop these systems, but they were the first to spread them around the world. So basically, we're told that the origins of religion, as they've been handed down to us, originated in India or Chaldea or Mesopotamia or Egypt even. But that doesn't matter. What matters is how were these systems brought into the West? Because they originated from the East and they're brought into the West. And the only people that fit that description are the Phoenicians, because they were the mariners, they were the travelers, the merchants. They spread this doctrine around the world.
The Phoenicians were obviously way before the Greeks, way before the Egyptians.
Yeah. The Greeks, I've mentioned even in the article that the Greeks admit that their whole system of astronomy, especially, and navigation and other sciences was given to them by the Phoenicians. I mean, Greek texts tell us this. So, the Phoenicians were the learned people of the ancient world. Yeah, just going back to religion, every doctrine, every faith, this is same with Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism. There's something that they call the esoteric and the exoteric teaching. So the hidden inner teachings that few people learn, and the outer teachings that are for the masses. So if you read the Bible or you go to church or listening to a priest, they'll present the outer teachings, not the esoteric inner teachings. Now, so
esoteric, you don't necessarily mean spiritual. I know it's all spiritual, but it's not necessarily.
It's probably esoteric is probably the more spiritual,
right?
Okay, but that is kept for themselves, basically. And that's kept for themselves for reasons of power, really, at the end of the day. So this is what we'll get into as well. So I'm not the first to make the connection between, religion and astrology or astronomy. Okay, so this is what I found as well with ancient religion, that it all goes back to the celestial bodies. And a lot of people say, but, the Egyptians and Phoenicians were just sun worshippers. They believed the sun, pagans. Yeah, but what is sun worship? They weren't just believing in the rays. Basically, if it wasn't for the sun, we wouldn't have life. So, the sun gives us, life. It gives us energy. It gives us warmth. It basically allows nature to develop and thrive, right? If we didn't have the sun, we wouldn't have life. So people end it there and say, okay, so that's what they believed in, because without the sun, we wouldn't have life. So obviously the sun has importance. That's God for them. But what I found is it goes actually beyond that. what I found that the ancients knew that God and the sun were not the same thing. Okay. There was something that was
A much higher power.
exactly what they called intelligence. So a greater intelligence. What they discovered was that the sun played the role as the conduit between this greater intelligence and the minds of mankind.
Mm.
So it's almost like if God is trying to speak, or speak is the wrong word, affect us, right? God will do it through the sun. So that's how I don't like using the word he, but yeah, connect with us or speak to us through the sun. This was what they found. And it is also discovered in modern science as well, but in another way. But we'll get to that towards the end of the article.
Okay. So, with regard to, as you said, the esoteric and exoteric teachings, how does that, I guess, connect to Albert Pike and his
Good.
view
Yeah.
on astrology, for example?
Okay, good. Because this is another thing that most people say, oh, Freemasons are satanic, they're demonic, anti-Christ, anti-Christian.
Yeah.
They also believe in this system of astrology and astronomy. The thing is that they keep their beliefs secret. And if you keep your beliefs secret, people assume what? The worst. Okay, so and I'm not a Freemason, by the way. Okay, before anyone, accuses me of that. Yeah, they've also kept these sciences secret to themselves, these secret teachings. Now, I'm not sure over time if Freemasons have lost this knowledge or still keep it amongst the very few, because I don't believe all Freemasons are aware of it, but the higher ups would definitely know this. And reading Albert Pike's literature, he seems to know that there is this connection between God and astronomy, or what? Yeah, okay. So yeah, I did find that within the Freemason literature.
But also Freemasonry, and again, this is probably a little bit off topic, but they believed in Hermeticism, or they practice Hermeticism, which again is a slight tangent to what you're talking about. So
not really. It's all connected. It all comes from that source.
Connected to Hermetics. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Astronomy and astrology and the what would you call the elements and connection with the spirit world.
Okay.
And how these things affect us, affect the mind.
Yeah.
Basically, that's what Hermeticism is about the mind, right?
Yes.
And then how to achieve a certain state of mind, the higher state of mind. And for them, you have to go through certain steps, basically. Okay.
Okay.
But yeah, like you said, another topic.
Of course.
What they found that the rays of the sun or the sunlight affected the mind itself. So the mind of us, the people. And this would happen also at certain times of the year, not just the year, because it works in cycles. Okay. So for instance, celestial cycles also have an impact on how much of this intellect or God speaking to us is coming through at a certain time. So this also goes back to why they kept astronomy secret, because if they were able to see in future what's coming down the track, right? So for instance, okay, we know by, certain cycles of the moon, certain cycles of the sun and some of the inner planets, how they affect us, right? For instance, they say if you plant under a full moon, the things that farmers know about, for instance, about planting in certain times of the year, a full moon, for instance, it affects the produce, right? It affects the plants in a certain way. So that way they can plan ahead and plan in the future. So, I mean, if you knew winter was coming, for instance, it would affect the way you plan for the future, right?
Sure.
For your plan for your crops. Now, this is no different to this. This just works on a larger scale. So perhaps they found that every 250 years, for instance, when a certain planet was coming across a certain path, that affected the human mind in a particular way. Okay. So if you have this kind of knowledge, right, for instance, you maybe can predict or your behavior changes depending on when is a good time to go to war. Okay. When is a good time to sail out into the ocean? Okay. So it has an effect. It affects what goes on here on the planet Earth, right?
mm,
and our behavior. Maybe people at certain times of the year are feeling anxious, or, well, for instance, they say in a full moon, there's a lot more crime committed, right?
mm, mm.
Certain studies have found that's where we get the word lunatic from,
That's right.
right? Because
Lunar, yeah, that's right.
yeah, moon is lunar.
Mm,
So, people become lunatics. The stars and the celestial bodies, believe it or not, affect us.
of
Okay.
course.
Okay. So what they found is these larger cycles, these larger patterns also have an effect that are not well known, or that they are starting to be rediscovered today.
Mm.
But, the ancients knew this thousands of years ago.
Which is
Okay.
why, on a much broader scale, you see a lot of the hieroglyphics that they've presented to us from, the various sites have them worshipping the sun, or at least we can see the sun and its rays. So they were big believers in that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I found that the ignorant always assume that the ancients, or sun worship in general is somehow satanic, or there's a lot more to it. What has happened, I mentioned this in the article, that it's attributed to the Phoenician priests, that what they did was, in order to keep this doctrine, which is actually a science, to keep it secret and to themselves, they created mythology and the allegories. So, the planets became gods, and the sun became Jesus, right? And the god of the heavens became Zeus,
Mm,
and
mm,
and it was created by these Phoenician priests for that reason, to keep it a secret. And then, astronomy for a long period of time is considered, and even today, astrology and all that is considered satanic by a lot of people, by
mm.
Christians in particular. Don't go there, it's satanic. I don't know how something part of nature is satanic like that, but
Well, as you said, there were a lot of ancient cultures that believed, or they worshipped the sun. From I can
all over the
mention
world.
Ra,
Yeah.
which was the Egyptian sun god. You got Helios, which is the sun god for the Greeks. Inti, which was the Incan sun god. So there are
Yeah,
everywhere
exactly.
is history is written.
Yeah. I mean, if it wasn't for the sun, like I said earlier, well, you wouldn't have life basically on the planet. You
Mm,
couldn't
mm.
live. But again, there's more to it.
Do you want to talk about astrology versus astronomy? So astrology, you mentioned Albert Pike and the connection between ancient astronomy and physics, and then you've got astronomy, which why the ancients held it in such high esteem. I don't know if you want to go there, or if you want to start talking about how the Phoenician
Yeah, I mean,
priests.
astronomy is the science of the movements of the celestial bodies, and
Mm,
astrology is how these bodies affect us, so affect the mind of humans. And that's the part that they've kept, to themselves, because,
mm,
like I
mm,
said, if you know when a certain going to happen, and you can manipulate events to coincide with those cycles. Okay. So,
mm,
like I was saying earlier, and this is also, like I said, part one of a series, of a two-part series, where in part two I discuss the reason this was kept a secret predominantly was to profit from it.
mm.
And we'll work and discuss that in next week's podcast,
Sure.
where this knowledge was used to make money. So that was one, I would suggest, one of the main reasons for doing this, for keeping it a secret.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Can we perhaps expand on that? When you say it was in essence to deceive mankind because they held control, or they held.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, you see, if people are believing in persons rather than, so, they've made all these planets, and they've
mm,
made them people, right?
mm, mm.
So, they've made them into, like it says, Zeus and Helios. It was
Helios, yeah, yeah,
Helios.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sorry, no, Helios is
Ra,
the sun. Apollo, and then you've got, Jesus, Mary. People are believing in these deities
mm,
rather than what they truly represent. Okay, which is, the planet, the celestial bodies, right?
mm.
Which affect us at certain times. Just like I said earlier, how, the
The
moon
moon affects the
affects
the tides. It affects people's
the tides.
Emotions,
mental
and yeah, that's right.
condition.
Mm,
Exactly.
mm,
So they have the same effect. Okay. Now, if you understand all this, if you understand this science, where and this body come in at this time,
mm,
and it's going to have this certain effect on humans,
mm,
right? You can benefit from it. This is why I also believe that the whole debate about chemtrails. Okay.
mm, mm. To cover up the sun.
See, well, yeah, from what I see, something is happening, okay, in the
Mm,
skies,
mm.
okay, artificial.
Although a lot of people are still probably asleep to the
Yeah,
fact that that's happening.
okay, yeah. And what I see when I see chemtrails and soon after they appear in the sky
Mm.
is a sort of like a fogginess and the sun isn't very bright and
That's right.
it's not the sky's not clear, right?
It's like
Okay.
a blanket of gas, a visible gas.
Yeah, exactly. And I was always wondering, but why would the people doing this, because a lot of people saying, oh, they're killing the planet, they're killing us, they're
Mm,
killing
mm,
life forms, and I said, but how does that benefit the people doing it? Why
mm,
would they do that to themselves and to their offspring
mm.
and leave a world where, it's poison to breathe, poison to live on.
Well, full of
They would
heavy metals
yeah,
like
yeah.
barium
I
and
have a hard time
aluminium.
believing they're going to destroy the planet and us along with it, right?
Mm, mm,
So the way I look at it is, okay, so they're doing this because they're either trying to slow down, right? Slow down or prevent this energy from the sun coming through to us. So in effect, God speaking or having an effect, a positive effect on us. So
mm,
they're trying to slow it down, block it, whatever, however it works. It's almost like a desperate measure to prevent this coming through.
mm.
Okay, that's the way I see it.
Which,
Go
based
on.
on your research, goes back to power that the sun had with the ancient cultures.
Exactly. And see now, modern science has also studied solar cycles, right? Solar cycles and solar activity over, in our history. And what they found is warmer temperatures
Mm,
have a certain effect on mankind, all right? And colder temperatures have another effect. So what they found is that when it was a warmer period, there was a dramatic increase in agriculture,
mm,
technology,
mm,
art, commerce, exploration, discoveries, and also population growth.
mm,
Okay. Now, I heard someone say that the reason they believe that the decline in population around the world,
mm,
especially in Europe, is because we're entering a cold period, right? And it's almost like we know inside that
mm,
this is coming and we are not reproducing because during a colder period, there's less abundance of food, vegetation,
mm.
right? So
Yeah.
almost like a defense mechanism kicks in. It is part of human nature. We don't even think about it. It just kicks in naturally, right? Yeah.
Despite the fact that anyone can research this, that the benefits of sunlight range from
Oh,
improved moods, boosting immunity. Our body produces
moods. Yeah,
vitamin D,
exactly.
lower blood pressure, it improves sleep. All the stuff that anyone can do basic research on. So, in terms of what you're saying, or your theory is that they're blocking the sun because we're getting ready for a winter.
That's not why they're blocking it. They're trying to block this positive energy.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I'm saying that we are entering a colder period, and
Mm,
that's why, you see a decline in, people giving birth.
sure.
It's almost like the humans are preparing themselves for harsher climate, tougher times,
Mm,
basically, where there's
mm,
less food. So if there's less food, you need less people,
mm,
right? Otherwise, people are going to starve, for instance. Okay.
mm.
We can negate that today with modern ways of farming and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, that
Yeah.
weren't around hundreds and thousands of years ago. So
Mm.
yeah, you were saying. Sorry.
No, this was just purely off the cuff, and you may not know the answer to it, but the theory that a lot of people have been talking about the second sun, that we have two suns. Is that purely conjecture, or are you aware of that at all?
Do you mean like the black sun?
That's right.
Um,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
right. Okay. Yeah.
A lot of people have been, through social media, taking videos of, what they say are, is a second sun. Now, come up with
I don't know.
anything.
There could be a number of celestial bodies within our system
Sure.
only come that only come around at certain cycles. Like
Mm.
maybe thousands of years, or maybe are not as visible as the other planets. And
Could be something as simple as just refraction of light.
yeah,
Uh,
I mean, a lot of these things it can be dismissed
mm.
like that as well.
Anyway,
So
I thought I'd
yeah,
say that because that's obviously a topic of conversation on social media. That's all.
yeah, and also I didn't discuss this in the article, but I found with another researcher, Velikovsky, right?
Mm-hmm.
Emmanuel Velikovsky, that in one of his books he mentioned something like particular times in our evolution. Okay, because a lot of people have a problem with evolution. So we started from this tadpole and a fish, and then we became it became human or whatever, right? Or from
Mm-hmm.
a primate and then became human. And people have a problem with that the description of evolution, and I have a problem with it too. What Velikovsky was saying in one of his books, that what happens is there's certain times, certain periods and cycles that a burst of intelligence hits us, right? It hits
Mm-hmm.
the planet. And so if you're a tadpole, for instance, no
Mm-hmm.
intelligence, nothing, you can't grow into any other form. But then the earth is hit with this ray of light, okay? This
Mm-hmm.
energy, plasma, and it sparks something in that life form, which makes it mutate. It's a quick jump. It's not millions of years, thousands of years. It's it's just a quick jump into some other form.
Right.
And this is what they refer to as the power of God. So this
Mm-hmm.
intelligence comes at certain periods and just, and that's what I think is happening. This is where we're going now. This is coming around to where this burst of intellect and intelligence is going to hit us, hit the planet. And that's what I believe they're trying to block out. Because for them, block out, I don't think they're going to achieve a block out, but they're probably trying to slow it down or make it less powerful because they want us dumb,
Yeah.
at the end of the
Yeah. Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It doesn't benefit them that we have this leap of evolution and intelligence, okay? But I didn't discuss that in the article, just something that
No, but
I
it's all,
thought of
we
now.
don't necessarily have to stick to the parameters of
Yeah.
the article.
Um,
We can talk about anything like we have just now in terms of the sun and its worship of ancient cultures. We can talk about the moon and its effect on the planet. We can
yeah.
talk about chemtrails. I think it's an interesting discussion. So maybe let's circle back to what the article was about, and maybe you want to talk a little bit about Phoenician priests, for example, and how they came about to teach the Egyptians or the Greeks and the Romans, etc.
Well, yeah. Well, we touched on that earlier, where I said that they were tasked with spreading, the mythology of religion and the allegories and creating the deities.
Mm,
And because they're the ones that spread themselves around the West, the world, all the way to England and beyond. I mean,
mm,
and there's even proof that they've crossed the Atlantic and went to the Americas, and they're the ones that probably spread this to the South American civilizations, like you
mm,
mentioned earlier,
mm.
the Incas and that, because a lot of what they believe is similar to what comes out of the civilizations of the East and the West. So
So
there
so
must have been a link there. There
mm.
must have been.
So in essence, all, I guess, religions funnel back to one main theme, or at least one main belief, or at least one main
On
doctrine,
main science, I like to say a
a
science.
science. Okay.
Okay, and this is the science. But giving this to everyone affords them power, and they almost don't need. Why do you need a priest class if you have this knowledge? You don't need a
Mm,
priest class. So for them, they want to retain that knowledge and that secret to themselves. It's
mm,
like a master craftsman keeps the, his skills to himself.
It's proprietary to him, so
Exactly.
it means that no one else can copy and then essentially take
Oh, it
over.
makes
Or yeah,
exactly. I know it upsets a lot of people when I talk about this kind of stuff and religion, and they should really just don't take everything that is said or you read, especially in the doctrines of the Abrahamic faiths. Don't take them on face value. Look deeper.
mm,
There's other veils, hidden veils. There's reasons for the allegories, and I'm not saying they're bad. There's reasons for them. Look deeper.
mm.
That's all.
I think it's interesting because if you're going to talk about the well-known historical facts, we all go back to the ancient Egyptians, and I don't think many people know that it goes further back than that, and it obviously goes further forward with the Greeks and the Romans, but the masses know of the Egyptians and how
Yeah.
they would worship the sun, for example, and how, and I don't want to bring in the Sumerians and the Anunnaki, and that again,
Well,
that's
they're probably the first. I mean, a lot of people say, some people say all this stuff comes out of India as well.
mm,
So
mm.
it's that area there in this valley.
Yes.
And like you said, yeah, Sumeria, Ur, the first city on, and this is the other thing, all right? Sumer. This is where Abraham comes from.
Yes.
Was it, sorry, or Moses? No, no, Abraham.
They okay. So, based on my readings, Abraham, in fact, both, right? So Abraham
No,
was
Abraham, sorry. Yeah, it
was
comes
the,
from
that's right.
Ur.
That's right.
They're telling you something. They're not saying there was a person called Abraham that
Mm,
came from there. They said the doctrine comes from Ur. Okay.
that's
So
right.
don't stop at Abraham, Moses, Isaac, and Jesus. Don't
Mm,
stop there. Go for where's it coming from? There's a reason it comes from Mesopotamia, from Ur, and
mm.
you go further back. But people, no, they
No,
take it
because
like he was a real person. And
yeah, because there have been certain groups throughout history that have hijacked that narrative, right?
yeah,
And so this is where we get to the, Old Testament versus the New Testament versus the Book of Enoch versus, the
yeah.
Quran and,
Yeah, well, even the Quran has Abraham, Judaism has
yes.
Abraham,
Mm.
and India has Brahman. It's the same word, okay?
Yes, yes. Look, it's fascinating, and again, I think that this is, I think, part one of our discussion.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more that we're going to discuss about what we see, or what you've titled the power of God. Is there anything else that you think
Yeah.
is of relevance that you would want to maybe
Well,
raise?
yeah. Yeah, I wanted to raise that. Writing this particular article was really to lay down the foundations for part two. So part two was what I wanted to write about, which is about merchant priest class, that they're the same, okay? So I don't separate the priests from the merchants because they work together, okay? It's the one idea. And the one idea is this idea about astronomy and astrology. And then I show how the merchants use it to make money and manipulate the minds of mankind. But I had to lay down the foundations of
Of
what does that
course.
actually mean?
So,
Yeah.
but you're saying that when you refer to, maybe explain for our audience what you define as the merchant priest class. Are they theologians that are business people?
Well, I think yeah, astronomers first, okay?
Mm,
So astronomers, scientists, that's what we would call them today,
mm,
right? Who discovered this science and then made this science into a religion.
right.
So, okay, so that's why they're priests, because they made it into a religion, okay, with all their
Interesting.
mythology and allegories, right?
Mm,
But they're merchants because they've used this science in order to profit.
mm,
But not only did they use it for commerce, and I'll show that in part two, and to profit from mankind, they also use it to manipulate the minds of mankind.
mm,
And that way you can profit even further. But they've also done this to create what we have today, which is civilization. Because without it, you wouldn't have had civilization. We would have stayed, little local villages, we would have stayed peasants,
Yes.
So we wouldn't have had all the advancements in technology and because that all comes from, from commerce, trade. We would have stayed ignorant. So, they've done some good, I guess you can say. Just to go back on the idea of the power of God, a few researchers into ancient religions have noticed that the god Al, which is considered the supreme god, the word Al is evident in the word electricity. Okay, and that's not by accident because they viewed, and as I've said in the article, that this power, the power of God, that it works through the sun like electricity, right? Like plasma. And that's why the god was called Al. And that's why we use the word Al when we talk about electricity.
But when you say Al, it means
Well,
God, or it means in a general sense deity.
yeah, but I mean the ancient god was the supreme god was called Al.
Okay.
Right? I was listening to this. There's a really great researcher called Bill Donahue, and he deciphers the Christian Bible and other religions from India to Persian religions, and he found the way he explains it is that he's saying God isn't electricity, but if we were to communicate with God, it would have to be through electricity. So that's the difference. It's not God isn't electricity, but it's the way God would communicate with us. You've probably seen this while researching stuff that a lot of people say that humans, we are electricity as well. We're electrical beings. Have you heard that before?
Of course.
Yeah, exactly.
We exude energy fields.
Yeah, and have you seen some images through like microscopes and lighting that the human form? Like I saw a photo where it was a photograph of a hand and it was almost like electrical. Have you seen that?
No, I
Don't know if you've seen
haven't, but I have seen diagrams that show, and this is based on the chakras as well. But we have a magnetic field around us,
Perfect.
which predominantly comes from the heart.
Exactly. So if we are a charge, an electric charge,
Mm,
and then God is another charge, there's positive and negative, or
mm,
that's the way we would communicate, right?
mm,
Through this plasma field or electricity. So that's what the ancients believed in. That was
mm,
the ancients believed that that's how you would communicate with God.
mm,
And that's what they saw the sun as, the way to communicate, almost like, the telephone or whatever,
mm.
communicating. So yeah, that's where that comes from, the electricity and the Al, the supreme God.
So how would that then, if we circle back to the very start about the power of God, is that where it all originated from?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. That's where they got the idea from.
And it's your belief that we call it electricity because of that, and that goes back to the Sumeric
Yeah,
times, the
definitely.
Phoenician times.
Al.
Yeah, yeah.
So then this electricity and this plasma will lead on to another discussion in part two, which
Yes.
we'll have in the next podcast. So I don't want to give it all away now
No,
because
but it's a very good start and a very interesting start, in fact, because there's a lot to know there, and it's even if you want to talk about modern science, they've shown that the human body exudes an energy field.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
even modern science is now converging into what you've just spent the last 40 minutes talking about.
Exactly. When we die, what are those lights out?
Yes, there you go.
The electric charge. And also when they try and revive someone whose heart has stopped beating, how do they do that?
That's called a defibrillator.
But it's an electric charge anyway. There's enough evidence there to show that the ancients again were correct in their theories. It's us that have lost out, but I think that's been done on purpose. Like I said, these people, this priest class know this. They have this knowledge. They know it, and they just keep it to themselves.
Well, that's certainly been an interesting topic to discuss. So there have been a lot of issues that were raised over the last 40 or so minutes, which will be a fantastic segue into part two of our discussion for next week, discussing what you've referred to as the merchant priest class and how, I guess the money side of this ancient science and how they created a business. And again, it's a fairly contentious issue and one that I think a lot of people will have their own views. But again, it's about doing your own research. It's about reading extracts, or at least reading research from previous historians. But I would encourage everyone to go and read various other articles, well-researched articles that Phoenician Hunter has published. You can find that at substack.com/Phoenician Hunter. Take up a subscription, because I can attest to it now that the articles that are released are actually very, very intriguing, and you will definitely learn a lot. So thank you, Phoenician Hunter, once again. Part one of our discussion has come to a conclusion. Look forward to part two.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, we'll continue this next week then.
Fantastic. Great to have you.